If darkness had a sound, it would echo like steel doors slamming shut. Hit subscribe because what you're about to hear is not just a prison story. It's a descent into a place where violence breathes, loyalty dies, and some men never make it out alive, even while serving time. The sirens began before sunrise. A prison transport truck screeched to a halt outside the east gate of Louisiana State Penitentiary, better known as Angola, a fortress of razor wire and gun towers surrounded by 18,000 acres of former plantation land. The guards inside the truck weren't shouting, they were silent. That was the first sign something was wrong. When the rear doors opened, 2 inmates stumbled out in chains, their uniforms smeared with blood that wasn't theirs. Behind them lay a third prisoner, face down, wrists bound, body motionless. He had been stabbed 17 times. Within minutes, the compound was on lockdown. Sirens wailed across the fields. Armed officers flooded the corridors. Helicopters circled overhead as though the prison itself might try to escape. Angola wasn't unfamiliar with violence. It had a reputation built on decades of brutality, gang dominance, and whispered executions that never made official reports. But this killing was different. It happened inside a secured transport vehicle, under armed supervision, a place designed to prevent exactly this kind of attack. Captain Elijah Broussard, a veteran investigator with the prison's internal security unit, arrived at the scene while the morning fog still clung to the ground. His face revealed nothing, but his eyes missed nothing. 22 years working inside Angola had taught him one truth. When violence erupts in a controlled space, it isn't random, it's planned. The victim was identified as Marcus Dalton, a former armed robbery convict serving 30 years. He wasn't a gang leader. He wasn't known for violence inside. In fact, he had spent most of his sentence working in the prison's metal shop, keeping to himself, which made his death more alarming. Someone had wanted him dead badly enough to kill him in a chained transport convoy. Inside the intake bay, the 2 surviving inmates were separated immediately. Both claimed the same thing. They heard a struggle behind them, but could not turn due to restraints. By the time the truck stopped, Dalton was already bleeding out. No weapon was found. That was impossible. Every inmate was searched before boarding. The transport compartment was steel-lined and inspected. Shackles restricted arm movement. There were only 3 prisoners inside, and yet Dalton had been butchered in transit. By mid-morning, Angola was tense. The prison population, more than 5,000 men, had already heard. News traveled through cell blocks faster than radio waves. Someone had been marked. Broussard walked through the metal shop where Dalton had worked. The machines were silent, but the men inside avoided eye contact. Fear lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. One inmate finally spoke under his breath. Red wasn't supposed to be on that truck. Broussard stopped. Transport logs confirmed Dalton had been moved last minute, replacing another inmate scheduled for court transfer. The substitution order had been signed just hours before departure. No reason given. In Angola, unexplained changes could mean protection or a death sentence. Broussard requested the original transfer manifest. The name removed from the list belonged to Jerome Bishop Landry, a high-ranking member of a prison gang known as the Syndicate, an organization rumored to control contraband flow, inmate labor rackets, and internal punishments. Landry had enemies. Dalton did not. So why was Dalton placed in his seat? By afternoon, Broussard interviewed the correctional officer who authorized the switch. The man, sweating through his uniform, insisted it came from administrative instruction, but there was no record in the central system. The signature authorizing the change existed only on paper, and the handwriting did not match any known supervisor. As the lockdown continued, another detail surfaced. Surveillance cameras covering the loading bay had experienced a 6-minute outage during boarding. 6 minutes, the exact window when Dalton was loaded onto the truck.
Inside the infirmary, the prison coroner delivered a quiet revelation. The wounds were too precise to have been inflicted during chaotic movement. Each strike was deliberate, controlled, and executed at close range, despite restraints. This was not a spontaneous attack. It was an execution. By nightfall, Angola felt less like a prison and more like a pressure cooker. Guards tightened patrols. Inmates whispered behind steel doors. Somewhere inside the compound, a message had been delivered in blood, and someone powerful wanted it understood. Broussard sat alone reviewing Dalton's file when a young officer knocked and slid an evidence bag across the desk. It had been recovered during a secondary sweep of the transport truck's drainage channel. Inside was a small shard of sharpened metal, filed to a surgical point and wrapped in cloth to mute sound. Improvised, concealable, professional. Etched on the cloth was a faded laundry stamp, B12. Laundry markings were assigned by housing blocks. B12 belonged to Bishop Landry, but Landry had never boarded the truck. And as Broussard stared at the evidence under the harsh desk light, a deeper question emerged, one that twisted the case into something far more dangerous. If the intended target never left his cell, then Marcus Dalton had died in his place. And when officers opened Landry's empty bunk during lockdown count, they found something that stopped the investigation cold. His mattress was neatly made, his belongings untouched, and Bishop Landry was gone. By the time the sun rose over the endless fields surrounding Angola, the prison was no longer simply on lockdown, it was sealed. No movement between blocks, no work crews, no chapel, no yard time. The gates that usually groaned open for supply trucks stayed shut, and armed officers stood posted along the perimeter fence with rifles angled toward the razor wire. A man had vanished from the most secure prison in America. Captain Elijah Broussard stood in housing block B12, staring at the empty bunk assigned to Jerome Bishop Landry. The mattress was tight enough to bounce a coin. His locker contained neatly folded state-issued uniforms, a Bible, and a stack of letters tied with dental floss. Nothing suggested escape. Nothing suggested panic. It looked like a man had stepped out for a moment and never returned. Angola's head count system was meticulous. Inmates were counted multiple times a day. Electronic logs tracked movements between zones. Guard signatures documented transfers. Yet, sometime between the midnight count and the dawn lockdown, Bishop Landry ceased to exist inside the prison. No alarms triggered, no gates opened, no cameras captured movement. Broussard had seen violence, riots, and stabbings disguised as accidents, but this was orchestration. He requested the night shift duty roster. 2 officers assigned to B Block had called in sick hours before their shift. Their replacements were temporary reassignees from another unit, both new to the facility, both now under administrative review. Neither could explain why Landry's cell had not been physically checked during the 3 a.m. round. They insisted they saw a figure lying in the bunk. In Angola, inmates sometimes shaped blankets to resemble a sleeping body, a classic deception. But that required planning and time. The question now wasn't how Landry disappeared, it was who helped him. By mid-morning, investigators widened the search. Maintenance corridors were opened, drainage tunnels inspected. Canine units combed the farmland surrounding the compound, where the Mississippi River curved like a natural moat. No tracks, no disturbed soil, no footprints along the perimeter. Escape from Angola without detection was nearly impossible. The prison sat miles from the nearest highway, surrounded by swampland and open fields that offered no cover. A man on foot would be visible for miles, which meant Landry hadn't left the property, or he hadn't left alive. Back in the security office, Broussard reviewed Landry's intelligence file. The syndicate, the gang Landry helped control, operated on silence and discipline. Violence inside Angola wasn't random. It was regulated, approved, and delivered as punishment or message. Dalton's murder inside the transport truck now looked less like a mistaken killing and more like a public execution meant for someone else, a message sent to the entire prison. But if Landry was the intended target, why remove him from the truck at the last minute? Unless someone knew the attack was coming, and someone ensured he wouldn't be inside. Shortly after noon, a guard recorded finding a maintenance uniform discarded in a utility closet near the industrial laundry facility. The fabric was damp with sweat and streaked with grease, the name patch removed. Inside the pocket, a broken plastic ID badge holder. No badge, no fingerprints, but the uniform size matched Landry's intake measurements. The laundry facility connected to service corridors used by staff, not inmates, corridors that bypassed housing units and led towards supply gates and administrative buildings. If Landry gained access